Has a Christmas schedule ever generated quite as much interest as this? Well, finally, after all the discussions, the briefings and leaks, the four UK governments have finally agreed upon a plan to ease restrictions over Christmas, and that's no mean feat, you might think, given the strategic disagreements that we've witnessed between them during this pandemic. It'll focus on this 5-day period in which up to 3 households will be able to form an exclusive bubble, and that's to meet in private homes. It's not to go out as a group to pubs or restaurants. It's worth mentioning that there'll be an extra day either side of the 5-day window if you're travelling in and out of Northern Ireland, and calls already tonight to plan your journeys well in advance given the demand there'll be. There'll be further guidance in the days and weeks to come on all sorts of aspects of Christmas, such as carol singing, if that's something that you're interested in. But in the meantime, expect a lot of appeals from all 4 governments that, however enamoured you might be of this relaxation of rules over the Christmas period, to exercise good judgment and restraint throughout.
One thing this Christmas certainly won't lack is a build-up. If seasonal plans stray sometimes into the delicate realm of family politics, then today they got the full Cobra treatment. The result, with the baubles come bubbles.
Well, I'm very pleased that we've secured agreement with the First Minister of Scotland, the First Minister of Wales, and also the First Minister and Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland to have a relaxation of the rules over Christmas. So for 5 days, from the 23rd to the 27th of December, people will be allowed to have a Christmas bubble.
The plan agreed by all 4 governments of the UK will allow 3 households to form an exclusive bubble to celebrate the holiday. The temporary relaxation will be in place from the 23rd to 27th of December, during which time travel restrictions will be lifted to allow journeys within and between the 4 nations. Household bubbles have to be fixed. They can gather in private homes, outdoor public spaces or places of worship. This was the response of some shoppers in Cardiff tonight.
Well, it's probably a bit of a shock because I have 2 sisters, grandparents, aunties, uncles. It's going to be a bit of a tricky process to decide who's going to be part of that bubble.
I do think Christmas is being a bit overplayed. I think that perhaps we should be taking a bit more, being a bit more cautious.
Still, all of this comes wrapped in caveats and complexities. 5 days of Christmas agreed, but what precisely comes before then is less clear. Northern Ireland enters a 2-week circuit breaker this Friday. In Wales, there's talk of tougher national rules. In areas of England, many wait anxiously to hear on Thursday what tiers they'll inherit post-lockdown. Bristol has some of the country's higher rates of COVID. Businesses like this hotel and restaurant group fear a possible new Tier 3 regime being imposed for much of the next month.
The Christmas period, December, is absolutely crucial for hospitality, but us as venues in particular. We normally take about 5,000 covers per venue and take about 25% of our revenue in that 3.5-week period. So to be without that is an absolutely massive hit to us as a business, and we are extremely apprehensive that we'll be put in a situation where we are not able to take any revenue whatsoever.
This evening, the First Minister of Wales called again for a joint 4-nation approach either side of this 5-day Christmas window.
I said in the meeting that we had, the Cobra meeting, that there's work for us still to do together to plot a path beyond Christmas, because we'll all be faced, I think, with numbers rising as a result of greater household mixing, and a common approach to dealing with that would also be important.
'Tis the season to be jolly careful, said the Prime Minister yesterday. Exercise caution visiting the vulnerable was one message today, an approach which David Jenkins from Bristol has already embraced.
You won't be mixing too much at Christmas?
No. Even my family, we're not meeting the family. They're coming round and waving through windows. I'm age 90 anyway, so, I have to be extra careful, I suppose. Let's... Number one enemy is COVID. And I talk about enemy because during the war, I was here and it went right through the Blitz, where we had a lot of problems, let's say a lot of problems. And we stuck at it. and we didn't give up. So let's have a bit of that spirit and say, well, a few more months or maybe, and then we'll beat the wretched thing.
A glimpse finally then behind a few windows of this year's collective Advent calendar. But there is more still to be revealed.
Well, the new Christmas rules mean you can mix indoors, but you cannot meet for a pint in the pub or a meal in a restaurant. And once your bubble is chosen, you cannot swap the households in it. So what dilemmas will this raise for families juggling their guest lists for Christmas Day? Joining me now is the Professor of Global Public Health at Edinburgh University, Devi Sridhar, and broadcaster and Labour peer, Joan Bakewell. Joan, how easy is it going to be to understand these rules for most families, do you think, and to stick to them?
Well, I think in the benefit of having some decision made is good. And in the shadow of that, I think all families now should get together to decide what they are going to do, because there are still lots of hazards. The restrictions have been lifted, but the pandemic has not been lifted. It's still just as powerful as it was. So we have to be vigilant right the way through Christmas. I'm slightly alarmed at the idea of huddling round the Christmas table for lunch. And I think we've got to think of new ways of enjoying Christmas so that we minimise the risk.
But do you think people will take from this that it's fine to get together, or that it's still down to them to decide the risk levels in their own households? And will older people feel under pressure to see their families when they say it's fine, we're coming over for Christmas?
I think everybody will come to their own decisions, because this festival matters to everyone, but it matters more to some than others. And I think the grannies and grandpas will be rather wary and be eager to keep the distance, even though they are visiting different households. I think the people will be responsible. It's making people responsible for their own health and that of those around them. And in a sense, that's quite a good responsibility, because they need to think up ways of avoiding infection. For example, I was in a car park during the lockdown, and I saw 2 cars draw up, and a family got out of each car, and one family threw a huge piece of transparent plastic over the others, and they hugged through the plastic. Now, that's inventive. We've got to find ways of getting together which don't increase the risk. We've got to imagine putting our Christmas trees outside the house, perhaps inside, decorating the outside of the house instead of the inside, doing our carol singing in the street, playing music in the street, doing things that we can share in the neighbourhood, rather than huddling together, as it were, around the fireside, which we're so used to.
Well, let's bring in Devi Sridhar at this point. And it's worth saying, I think the government is going to give us more guidance on things like carol singing. But, I mean, Devi Sridhar, you have constantly made the point that the virus doesn't care whether it's Christmas or not. Do you think these rules are going to lead to a rise in cases?
Yes, I mean, it's inevitable that when you have more people mixing indoors, you have travel restrictions being lifted, meaning moves from high prevalence to low prevalence areas. We are going to pay for Christmas holidays with probably a January national lockdown. The thing I would say is the future is bright. We have vaccines, 3 now, which are effective. We have mass testing coming online. So why risk getting infected in the next few weeks when actually in a couple months we'll be in a fundamentally different position and a much safer one? Why not rationally hold out for a few months? We've been in this for 10 months already. What's another few weeks?
So are you hoping that people will take their own decisions not to meet up at Christmas to the extent of the rules?
Yes, exactly. I think everything that was said before was exactly correct, which is we are in a pandemic. So this is a pandemic Christmas. We can still celebrate the values of Christmas, but in a safer way. I think all that was being said in terms of being outside, going for walks outside, being part of your local community, taking care of each other. It's not really a decision for government. The decision is, do you want to have the virus spread within your home if you're hosting a gathering, or bring it to someone else's home as a guest? Why take that risk right now? I just think, we don't need to go as far as the government. We all have to look out for our families and for our neighbors and communities.
But it's been a very long and lonely time for many people. And here they are being told by the governments of all the 4 nations, yes, you can get together. It's a big ask, isn't it, to say, well, I don't think you should.
Can I intervene here? Because we've invested so much capital since March in protecting ourselves, in protecting our communities. We've done very well, and it would be terrible to throw all that away for carelessness over protection over the Christmas period. I mean, we don't want to be shot in the trenches just as the armistice is arriving. I mean, we're nearly there. We've got the vaccine. It'll come in the new year. Just let's be a little bit patient and cautious so we don't throw away all the effort we've invested in looking after each other.
Well, Debbie Streeter, how would you advise people to take the risk assessment in their own families?
Well, I think it's really clearly to first say, don't travel. I mean, stay local. The second thing is if you are going to see others, see them outside, get out for walks, have meals outside. We know that's so much safer. If you want to decorate outside, and also ventilate. So if you really want to have people in your homes, keep the doors open, keep the windows open. We know ventilation makes a big difference. So I think it's these kind of steps we can take to protect each other. And also, if you know people who are vulnerable, if you know people who are elderly, you can still look out for them, drop them packages, give them a call, tell them you're thinking about them, but actually just say, hold out a few months. I mean, in Easter, we're going to be in a much better position. By next summer, instead of a Christmas inside, we can have, a delayed Christmas on the beach.
There is a big inequality problem here, though, as well, isn't there? In that it's much easier to be safer at Christmas if you've got a big house in the country than if you're in a crowded flat or urban home.
Yes, I think it's a time to take to the streets, to use the parks, to use any avenues outside which you can, to put, I don't know, chestnut burners outside to come together as a community. Look, we got into the streets and we banged our saucepans. Surely we can invent ways to enjoy Christmas together where it's safer, where we're apart, where we're in the fresh air, and yet where we can still have a good time.
Baroness Bakewell, Professor Sridhar, thank you both very much.